Welcome to the Rochester, New Hampshire History Podcast, a monthly show that will shine a light on a piece of history that has been all but forgotten.
Huntley Spaulding of Rochester served many roles in his lifetime. He was New Hampshire's governor in the 1920s. He was also a philanthropist. Huntley and his family donated over $350,000 for the creation of the Spaulding High School. He was a successful businessman as he was involved with the operations of the Spaulding Fibre Company. What some may not know is that during World War I, he was the federal food administrator for the state of New Hampshire. Like his previous roles, he was successful in this as well.
On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany and entered the First World War. There were a lot of unknowns at that time. The war had commenced in 1914, and in 1917, the war showed no sign of ending. The future looked dark, and the government began to plan not for a one-year war, but for a 5-year or a 10-year war. At the start of the war, meatless Mondays and wheatless Wednesdays were practiced to help ration food. When Mr. Herbert Hoover was called on to take the position of Federal Food Administrator of the United States, he believed the food policy would be based on voluntary rationing. "Food will win the war" became the slogan, and the government printed posters and educational materials and also published newspaper articles to indoctrinate the American public. Herbert Hoover selected Huntley Spaulding to act as his representative in New Hampshire.
As the federal food administrator for the state of New Hampshire, Huntley was responsible for the food reserves in the state. To reduce the use of wheat, Huntley initiated 2 special campaigns. The first one was the Great Potato Drive from April 15th to May 15th of 1918. In 1917, the federal government called upon the nation's farmers for increased potato production. The farmers succeeded. The 1917 potato crop in the United States was nearly 100 million bushels above average. In order that this large supply of potatoes might not be lost and that it might be used to relieve the strain on the valuable wheat supply, Huntley Spaulding launched the Great New Hampshire Potato Drive. The slogan was, "Buy and eat potatoes now." The government wanted every person to eat 4 potatoes a day and eat less wheat products. To promote potato usage, contests were held for the best wheatless recipes. Posters were distributed to promote the potato drive, and citizens felt honor-bound to comply to the government's demands. The Great Potato Drive was a wonderful success, for not only were the local potatoes moved from the bin to the dining table, the state also did its full share in helping to use up the surplus potatoes from Maine. At the end of the potato campaign, Spaulding initiated another drive to reduce the use of wheat, the Great New Hampshire Cornmeal Campaign from May 15th to June 15th, 1918.
"A pound of corn used is a pound of wheat saved" was the slogan used in this campaign. New Hampshire had an excess stock of cornmeal amounting to 2 million pounds. It could not be exported, and it would spoil if not consumed immediately. Like the potato drive, citizens felt it was their patriotic duty to do as the government requested. The millers of New Hampshire began to mill all the cornmeal they could. Housewives and restaurants used the excess cornmeal as a substitute in bread. The result was that the people of New Hampshire had consumed all the excess cornmeal, thus conserving more wheat. Many called the government's food conservation efforts as Hooverizing, as an insult to Herbert Hoover. However, these efforts succeeded in saving enough food for the American military. At the end of the war, in November 1918, the food conservation program ended, and the Federal Food Administration had become obsolete and was renamed as the American Relief Administration. Its mission was to prevent famine by delivering food to war-torn countries in Europe. Following the war, Huntley Spaulding served as chairman of the European Relief Council, a private charity that worked with other charities and government agencies to raise millions of dollars to aid orphans and refugees caused by the war. And this ends the podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please email bobgriffinpodcast@gmail.com and come back next month for another episode of Rochester, New Hampshire History.